I'm Madeline. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November the 14th of 1985. It was a really terrible day in kindergarten. My home group is the How It Works group in Happy Valley, Oregon. And we meet on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock, and you're all welcome, and believe it or not, we can hold all of you, but we will need to make extra coffee. I want to thank everyone for the lovely invite to come here. The last time I came here, I lost my voice, which some of you considered a moment of compassion, but I was frantically trying to get it back before I had to talk, and it really didn't come back. It was kind of embarrassing, but some people took it as a moment of reprieve. And I want to thank John for picking Tom and I up at the airport, and for the entertainment. And if anyone was in Starbucks and you find John's 8-step amends list, please give it to me because I'm Facebooking that shit. So, who leaves their 8-step in the middle of Starbucks? John does. Anyway, I love coming to Arizona. I've got a lot of incredible friends here, and that's what happens when you raise your hand and say, what do you need? The way I was taught when I walked in these rooms, and I'm never here because it sounded like a good idea at the time. In fact, the minute I always hang up the phone or I get, answer the email, I always think I miss the good old days when I could lie. So much easier. But something happened, and I'll tell you that something that happened was, I remember I was not one of those people who got sober and everything was great. I remember thinking, whew, thank God I got sober when I did. And about that time, all my wreckage caught up with me. So I did not have Midas touch sobriety. And it was like alligator closest to the boat for a long time. And I remember I had been asked to speak, and I did not want to speak because my life was not exactly puppies and rainbows. And I remember I went to my sponsor and I said, look at everything that's going on. I mean, really, what am I going to tell these people? Stay sober and your life can suck too? And, and I knew. And she said, well, if you can find it in the book where that's a valid reason for saying no to a request, I think that's absolutely okay. And like a sucker, man, I went pouring through this book because I knew that there was a clause that said, please, if you are that sick, please stay home and don't spread the disease. What I found came to be my favorite paragraph in all of the big book, and it's on page 102. And it says, your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth, right here, on such an errand. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. Standing up in front of a large group of people is never my cup of tea. From the time I was a little kid, I was neurotically shy. I mean, like hyperventilate, throw up, pass out. Oh my God, they'd kill Kenny on South Park, kind of, just to have an episode all the time. So I was not one who wanted to be up here. And when I walked into an AA meeting, in the first podium meeting, and I saw someone up here, I thought, oh, hell no. I have nothing important enough to say that I want to be up there. I've sat next to people who said, boy, that looks fun. And I thought, are you crazy? Because even when I came into AA, I would get so nervous at a podium meeting that my knees would knock and my eye would start to twitch, and I looked like I was having a seizure. So, in fact, I remember being at a meeting where I had to slap my hand over my eye in order to get through my share. So this was not on the highlight list for me of things to do. Neurotically shy, hid behind my books, did not want to be in front of people, just wanted to fly underneath the radar. Some of you who know me know that I feel like podiums ought to come with stirrups because I feel the same way at the gynecologist. And there was nothing natural about standing up here and being this exposed. And the last thing I want to do is share. And no matter how many times I go to the bathroom, I still need to pee and have gas. So same thing. And you probably need a different speaker other than a nurse after dinner. But I got here, and all I know is that I never wanted to feel the way I felt. It wasn't about the things I had done. It was the way I felt when I came crawling into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous through a rehab. I never want to have to go back there. I'd love to tell you I'm here because I'm such a great person and it's strong moral character and good virtue, but that's just a load of hooey. I am here to save my ass. It's what motivated me to come through the doors in the first place. And I have to say, it's probably what motivates me most mornings. My first thought is not, how can I be good today? My first thought is usually, help me not be the a-hole I was yesterday. If I can move away, just keep backing away from the flames, I feel like I'm doing better. I don't know about you, but when I got here, I felt very cheated, and it caused me a lot of confusion for a while, because some of you had these great stories about your families and your alcoholic families, and the drinking and the fights and the parties, and I didn't. I grew up in a bleeding deacon Southern Baptist family, and my parents are both deceased, but their names were Joseph and Mary. No shit. And you would tell these stories about what went on in your family, and it was like Technicolor, and you could just like flash over to my family, you could hear the damn crickets. It was gray, it wasn't even black and white, it was boring. These people needed a drink really bad, and they didn't. And my dad was a type who might drink a beer, mow on the lawn, and not finish it. My mother was a type, she was having a little trouble sleeping. We had to drive to the next town over, because heaven help us if someone saw her with wine in her cart. And she was the kind who would drink like one, maybe two fingers, and she would stop and say, oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel it. I have to stop. And even as a young child, that used to just piss me off. I just thought, why can't my parents be normal? My dad was in the music industry, which was kind of odd being Southern Baptist, but you know, they're like cats. You know, they're doing it, you just can't catch them. And so being in the music industry, my dad got all these massive decanters of booze, these limited edition bottles. And my mother was the kind of person who would go, how pretty. And she would put it on the shelf for decoration, in these big bookcase shelves we had. And to tell you what kind of freaks they were, when I got sober at 26 was when I had to confess that there'd been water in those bottles for 13 years. Nobody in my family was ever gonna open them. Nobody. Nobody had a clue that there'd been water in there since I hit puberty. Nobody. And but I can tell you that I grew up and I felt different. I just felt, I come from a big family. I have a twin brother. And I remember people would look at me and say, God, you have a twin. I bet you're really close. And I would have a blank stare because I didn't feel close. I felt like a stranger. I have no clue what the rest of my siblings felt like. All I know is what I felt like. And what I felt like was that I just grew up in this very emotionally sterile environment. The only person who was allowed to get angry was Mom. And the rest of us just had to be fine. You could do self-pity and depression, but by God, you couldn't be angry. And I just lived in my own little world, terrified of anyone paying any attention. I just was trying to fly as low as possible and not call any attention to myself. And I can tell you that about age 13, I decided I had milked all the fun there was out of straight A's on a report card. And I twisted my twin brother's arm and I said, let's go crack open one of those bottles. And it was like the classic twin study, because I can tell you that he took a drink and I took a drink. And when it went down with him, it went plop. I can tell you to this day, it goes down, it goes plop for that boy. I took a drink and it went down and it went boom. The little girl who felt so like I was always about to just fly apart, all of a sudden I just knew I was going to be okay. I didn't care what happened the rest of that night. All I knew is I didn't want to stop. Anything that felt that good, I wanted more of. Now, I'll tell you, I drank the same way the first time I drank to the last time I drank. I don't know too many 13-year-old social drinkers anyway, but I always drank like a pig. I was always had this insane drive to just drink as much as I could. Only under duress, only under some type of coercion did I ever put any type of cap on my drinking. I always just wanted to drink to excess. And I always got sick. I always threw up. I always blacked out. I always passed out. And those were never deterrents for me. They were deterrents for anybody who was around me, but they were never deterrents for me. I never woke up saying, I'm never doing that again, ever. Those moments of peace, those moments of feeling okay in my skin, I didn't care what it cost. And probably one of the things that just about killed me during that time was the fact that was going to be a death sentence for me anyway, was I was a good student. I was a good kid. That flying under the radar stuff served me well. They talk about the 4 things that can keep an alcoholic from getting sober are health, wealth, youth, and intelligence. And I was really good at making grades, and I was really good at working hard, and everybody loved me, and it just about killed me, because that was going to be the story for the next few years. I had teachers who would lie for me. I had teachers who would make excuses for me because I didn't give them any problems and I was a good student. So, all I knew is that I'd found what I wanted, and I didn't care what the consequences were. I can tell you that I started dating him my senior year in high school, and he wasn't an alcoholic, and we slugged it out for 3 years, and because it was a terrible relationship, and when it absolutely wouldn't work, we did the alcoholic thing and got married, and I was going to fix it. But I can tell you what happened was that we fought constantly about how much I was going to drink. And he was probably the second most shocked person when I got sober that I was an alcoholic. But it was a constant argument in our house about how much I was going to drink. It fell on deaf ears. And part of it was he always never wanted me to go anywhere. And I thought, you're such a party pooper. And it wasn't until I did my first inventory and I looked at the fact that I always said I was going to go have a drink or two, and I'd be home around 7 or 8. And I always showed up, knee walking drunk, 2 or 3 in the morning, my clothes in disarray, not sure where the car was, and I couldn't understand why he didn't have a warm, fuzzy feeling about what I'd been doing that night. And no wonder he had such a death grip on me about what I was doing and where I was, because I was a blackout, oblivion drinker. I had no clue. I couldn't tell him what I'd been doing that night. I lost all control when I picked up a drink. Once all those little constraints were taken off of me, being at work or whatever, I was off to the races. I can tell you this time I got pregnant, and I didn't want to be pregnant. And it was probably one of the hardest things for me to talk about when I got sober, because nice girls don't say they don't want to be a mom. And, although I grew up in this family where it wasn't, we had this very rosy picture to the outside world, there were things that weren't okay on the inside of that house, and I wasn't safe as a child. And the last thing I wanted to be was responsible for another human being. I mean, I knew I could make a buck. I was really good at making a buck. I was in the right place at the right time. I was the highest paid female in that Fortune 500 company at the age of 25. And that almost killed me. But the last thing I wanted to be was a mom. I did not want to be a mom because I did not want to have to be emotionally responsible for a human being. I did not want to be responsible for keeping her safe. Nobody kept me safe. How was I going to keep her safe? But you know what? I was pregnant, and there wasn't much I could do about it. I'm going to tell you that my mom, God bless her, became my guardian angel because she took care of my daughter a lot. Never questioned, never gave me any grief, never harassed me, never shamed me about being gone all the time. And a lot of that is that all those things that we, those trappings that we call success. I made a lot of money and I worked a lot of hours and I had a lot of prestige, and so it's, it was the story of my life. Get off my back. Get off my back. I'm working as hard as I can, and she's taken care of. So what's your deal? The deal was I was gone all the time because I didn't want to be at home with that no fun husband, and I did not want to take care of that baby that I was terrified of. As you can imagine, the little storybook romance fell apart. And when he left, I remember saying to myself, "Oh my God, thank God he's gone. I can drink like I want to." As if it wasn't bad enough, boy, I tell you, when he was gone and that one little control was gone, I did drink exactly like I wanted to. And that drinking continued around the clock. My boss did not know what to do with me. He went to my employee assistance director during this time, and she said, "Oh, you can't touch her. She makes more money than anybody else, and until it affects her job, you really can't say anything." He did call me in one day to tell me how terrible I looked. Now, I got to tell you, I had longer hair then, and I was a bar drunk. I was an everywhere drunk, but I was a bar drunk, and chain smoked, and had that puking problem. And I figured if I went home and changed into a new suit, we're good. And it was the 80s, and I did alcohol and all of its cousins. And if you think I'm fast now, you should have seen me back then. And I just vibrated out of the chair. But I remember my boss called me in and told me how terrible I looked one day. And I was pissed. I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe you're going to take issue with the way I look. Do you know how much this suit would cost me? I thought, I have seen your frumpy wife. I cannot believe you would say something like that to me. And his wife was fine. His wife was a beautiful woman. She stayed home and took care of the children, something I was incapable of doing, so I put her down. But I know today that I had to look terrible. I mean, and I was the kind of drunk. If I was out and I was a puker, I'd just go ahead and speed that process up. I would go outside and shove my finger down my throat, make myself get sick, and then come back in. Tic-tac, anybody? And just want to party some more. It never occurred to me, stop. It was, no, empty. You can put some more in. And so I would just, bleh, you know, and then find it in my hair the next day. So, you know, my boss has started slipping articles in my desk, in my in basket, and I don't know, because this is way before the internet, but my employee assistance director was feeding these articles about women in business, alcoholism in women, and all this crap, and I always thought my secretary Xeroxed the wrong page. I thought, what the hell is this? Where did this come from? And I threw it away, and I'll tell you, the reason is because it did not apply to me. I still to this day have a hard time sometimes when we are talking to someone who say, is alcohol a problem in your life? Alcohol wasn't a problem in my life. It was a problem in other people's lives. But it was a solution for me. I truly believe alcohol kept me alive long enough to get here, to find that sufficient substitute. Because the way I felt as a child, if I had not found that solution of alcohol, I'm afraid I would have blown my brains out. Because I lived with that impending doom of wanting to in my life all the time until I found alcohol. And then it made things okay for me. Life was worth living. So when everybody else is having a problem, I don't understand what the problem is. But the problem that was happening for me is that I am this blackout drunk, and I'm this bar drunk. And the thing that happened to me was that I got to the point where I could get physically drunk, but I couldn't get mentally drunk anymore. I'd lost the gift of forgetting everything and getting that peace. And the bad thing for people like me, women like me, who go out there and are running and gunning and getting that physically drunk, is that I got myself in situations where I couldn't protect myself. You can't be the person who's basically paralyzed from all the alcohol and drugs you've consumed and expect to be safe out there. And that doesn't excuse anybody's behavior, trust me. But, you know, I'd love to tell you that got me sober, but it didn't, and it happened more than once. But the worst, you know, one was coming to, and I came to a lot. But this time I came to because I'd been strangled. I'd been left for dead. And that moment of terror, you know, and I was such a driving drunk. I can't tell you the times I walked around my car looking for bumps and blood. But this one, I woke up in a bed full of blood. And I remember that moment of thinking, please, just please, God, please tell me it's my blood. Please tell me I haven't hurt another human being. And the relief I felt when I knew that it was my blood. And I couldn't talk because of being strangled. I was pretty swollen, but I crawled my ass to an emergency department. This is years ago. And they sat me in the waiting room for hours, in the middle of this busy waiting room, and they gave me a towel to sit on so I wouldn't ruin their furniture. And I just remember there crying just puddles of bloody tears on the floor, wishing I could die, because I could hear the people talking. They could see all the bruises. They could see this bloody towel and talking about that drunk girl. And I didn't want to get sober. I just wanted to check out. And the thing I always say is that there's no waste in God's economy, ever. Anything in my life has value. Because in sobriety, I went back to school and became a nurse and became a forensic nurse so I could take care of victims. And I never set anybody on a bloody towel out in a waiting room where everybody else could point fingers and stare at them. I made sure that person got some privacy and some dignity and some respect and some compassion for what had happened to them. Because I know what it's like to sit where my brothers and my sisters. Don't think that it just happens to women. It happens to men as well. But to have some type of way of giving back that what wasn't done for me, I could do for someone else. So I'm so grateful that sobriety has taught me how to make anything into a positive, even something as horrid as that. But I did not get sober. I drank with such a vengeance after that, just trying to blot out the pain of what had happened. And I could not get mentally drunk ever again. I could pass out, and that was the only thing I could get as far as any type of peace. And you know, I knew what it looked like to be a decent human being. And I had this child that I knew I wasn't doing right by. And I would say to myself, I'm going to stay home tonight. I'm going to be a good mom. I want to cook her like a real meal that didn't come out of a microwave. I want to clean my house. I want to read her a story. I want to watch a movie with her. I want to go to work tomorrow. I want to stay all day. Those are my big goals. Just try to make it 24 hours. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't make it 24 hours. Man, by lunch, I'd change my mind. I could not go that long without drinking. Because, see, if just not drinking was the solution for me, you'd probably have someone different here tonight. Because, see, when I just don't drink, I am crazier than a shit ditch rat. In fact, for me, I believe that coming into AA and just not drinking is kind of like throwing up and not opening your mouth. It's going to feel a little good, and then it's going to get real bloody uncomfortable. We have a design for living. We have a program of recovery. And for me, just not drinking and telling people to just not drink makes me crazy, because I am not someone who can just not drink. And I believe it's when we talk about in that 7th step, when it calls that humility a precious quality, because humility is about change. And if I don't do more than just not drink, I have to know I need to do more than just not drink. I have to change. And because if I don't change, I won't be happy. And if I'm not happy, I'll go back to drinking. So I got to tell you that when I made a phone call to that employee assistance director, and I'd lied my butt off to this woman before. She had asked me about my drinking, and I instinctively lied to her. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, I am not telling you about my drinking. You're wearing a puffy sleeve blouse with a little cardigan. Are you crazy? What do you know about my life? And I'll tell you what, when all the wheels fell off my cart, I called that woman, and this time she gave me the little test, and I got an A. And I remember her saying, are you willing to do anything to change your life? And I said, I'm willing to go walk down the middle of Woodlands Parkway naked if it'll help. And she giggled, because I had. Got my picture in the paper. My boss was so proud. And she said, well, she called my drunk boyfriend in and asked me if he was sober enough to drive me. And what I didn't know is that I'd had this standing reservation at chemical camp. They'd just been waiting for me to ask for help. So they were like, go home, throw some stuff in a suitcase, and take her right away. And so within like an hour, I'm at this rehab. I have no clue. All I know is that she said I was going to go here every day for 6 weeks. I really didn't understand it was a spend the night kind of deal. But they took all my clothes, and they had put me in jammies, and this nurse with no sense of humor was asking me some questions. But she left me this pile of literature. And I remember they had a big book. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I'm not going to be here that long. But they had some pamphlets. And by this time, they brought my roommate in. And she was this beautiful, tall British nurse, very, very, very clinically sterile, and had a little boy the same age as my little girl. And but I started reading through these pamphlets. And they were talking about not drinking one day at a time, but I've had a little college, and I knew I could see right through that. They were talking about not drinking ever again, and I freaked out. I thought, oh my God, this is crazy talk. I have overreacted. Madeline, you drama queen, you got to call somebody to come get your ass out of here. These people are talking about never drinking again. Never crossed my mind. Never crossed. I don't know. I'd have probably been dragging my feet outside the car down the freeway if I'd known that was where I was going. It never crossed my mind. I'd always thought about slowing down, healing up, moderating. Don't do this, add that. I had never thought about quitting, ever. And I remember thinking, my God, you have overreacted. This is way harsh. And the whole time that I wanted to try to talk myself out of there, all I could think about was taking a drink. I would have even taken pills I didn't like. I would have taken anything to change the way I felt. And this nasty little voice popped up and said, normal people don't get themselves locked up in chemical camp, wearing someone else's jammies, trying to convince themselves they're not an alcoholic, and the whole time all they can think about is drinking. And I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. But about that time, they give you the little golf pencil because they're afraid you're going to kill yourself with a real one. And I thought, oh my God, I'm here for it doesn't even start until I get out of detox. But I thought, I'm here for at least 6 weeks. My brother's wedding was that weekend, and I thought, well, I would have been drunk, and probably a good thing I'm not there. And then I realized, as I'm making my little prisoner hash marks, that I put myself in there for Thanksgiving, and I thought, oh, crap. Well, it's not a huge holiday, but my moment came when I realized I'd put myself in there for Christmas. First time this selfish, self-centered person ever thought about how her actions harmed another person, because I always rationalized that I worked hard and made a lot of money and she was taken care of. But I knew that I was not going to be there. This was a lockdown rehab. No one was getting out, and I wasn't going to be there for my daughter. And I started to sigh, and I started to cry, and then I just began to sob, and then it became the old Southeast Texas wail, you know. You're flopping on the bed, and I am hysterical about what a horrid mother I am, and I cannot believe that I've done this, that I was going to do this to my daughter. And about this time, my poor roommate, who was quite the cool fish anyway, she'd known me for about 45 minutes, she came over to comfort me, and you know when people really don't want to touch you? And I'm like hysterical and talking about, everything, how horrible this is and what I've done to my kid. And about this time, I start to see her shoulders going. And all of a sudden, Sandra let out this huge, I guess it was British wail. Wah! And she begins, it's a scene now, because we're in the room right next to the nurse's station anyway, and you can hear us like, chorus of coyotes. Anyway, and I always remember, because poor Sandra, she was like, oh, Madeline, how do we get ourselves into this bloody effing mess? By this time, we've attracted the crowd, and now the director of that rehab was a member of the fellowship, is in there, and he's sitting with the piles of snotty toilet paper and two hysterical women, and, we're having a little effect on the rest of the hallway as well, And I remember him trying to console us, and I remember him telling us, you are giving your kids the best Christmas present you could ever give them. And I thought, you are so full of shit. She's 3. I am pretty damn sure she wants toys. And even as incompetent and absent a mother as I'd been, I knew she wanted me there. And I was not going to be there. My wonderful sense of planning, I was not going to be there. My wonderful sense of planning, I hadn't bought her anything. No, I'm coming from a family. She was the first grandchild. She was going to be spoiled beyond belief, but she wasn't going to have anything from me. And there was no undoing that. I can tell you that ever since then, I started buying Christmas in January, and it's an all-year affair. Because what happened was that I came to know that the best Christmas present, the best birthday present, the best anything I ever gave my daughter was becoming a sober mother in Alcoholics Anonymous, hands down. The greatest gift to her and to me. This woman who did not know how to be a mom learned how to do that in these rooms. You taught me. My sponsor had never had any children, but she was a kindergarten teacher. And I would bring my daughter to meetings, and she'd feed her chocolate the whole freaking meeting, and then hand her back to me. Woo, she's yours. And ding, ding, ding. But I just lost her in meetings. You taught me, she used to always tell me, treat her like a little drunk. Show her the same kindness and patience and tolerance you do a drunk who walks in this room. And I just brought this child with me. She loved you. She would just disappear into your arms. You loved her, you played with her, you showed me how to be a mom. You showed me how to receive affection. You taught me how to give it to her. And she grew up being this huggy child. She's still a huggy child today. And I always tell this story. When she was little, we were in the dentist office, and she's chatty, and I'm reading people. And she's talking to the little old lady next to her, and she starts telling she's been talking for quite a while, and I was not paying much attention, but she starts to tell this woman about all the uncles who come and spend the night at her house. And she's running out of fingers, and I'm getting the stink eye, right, from Grandma, and I know what she's talking about all these wonderful men in the program who were like uncles to her, who were like big brothers to her, who come over, hang out, spend the night, no funny business, absolutely the safest people in my life. But I thought, I cannot tell Grandma this. She doesn't have to think I'm a hoe. So my daughter just loves when I tell the story. She just laughs. I said, how come you didn't tell them about any of the women who stayed at our house and lived with us? She said, I don't know. But I can tell you that, when I was in that rehab, probably the greatest gift ever that I got out of rehab was that it had meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous were brought in there from the community 7 nights a week. And if you weren't in the meeting, there in the facility, they put you in the happy van and they took you out to a meeting. And we had members of the community, of the AA community, who brought in step studies and big book studies. And we weren't allowed to have anything except for those materials, except my roommate was pregnant and I'm a criminal, so we smuggled Cosmo and Glamour underneath her shirt. We also stole all the coffee from the counselor's office because they were going to make us drink decaf. Can you believe that? And can't take coffee away from a speed freak. But anyway, but what they did was they gave me that introduction into Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps. And there was an old guy there who had been sober, and he was a volunteer there, and he had been sober forever. And his name was Frenchie, and he was an old coon-ass, and he knew everybody in Houston. And so I said, do you know anybody who could be my temporary sponsor? And he came back with a name and a number, and he said, if you call this woman, she'll meet you your first night out. She'll be your temporary sponsor. And I said, okay. So I called her up, and her name was Judy M., and she was absolutely so gracious and warm on the phone, and I found out later that was a total act. And she was a shrew, but she said, great, I'm chairing the meeting. That night when you get out, I'll be easy to spot because I'm chairing it. And I walked in and sat down, and she waved at me, and I don't know how she knew I was a new person, but I took one look at her, and I didn't like her. She was way too bloody perfect for me. I thought, Frenchie, what were you thinking? I need someone with my issues. Look at her. And I just did that whole female thing where we just go, no, not going to work. Hadn't said a word except wave at me, and I already think she's awful. But then we went to coffee afterwards, and I went with her and her oldest baby and that baby's oldest baby, and it was Judy in Utah. And the youngest one at least feigned, she was polite. Judy in Utah, I was telling them my plans of staying sober, and they like rolled around in the booth and were high-fiving each other and laughing and rolling their eyes, and I thought, bitch, I'm right here. I can see you making fun of me. But what Judy Macco had, God bless her, she passed away 6 years ago, was that she had this program. And she said, I'll be your sponsor, but my job is guidance and direction. And my guidance and direction is you get all the way in the program. You don't sit on the outside eating the crumbs. You get at the banquet table and you eat the whole bloody meal. And when this home group needs anything, or this district needs anything, or a conference, whatever needs to be done, you raise your hand, because we get all the way in the middle of this program. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But don't be telling anybody I'm your sponsor. And I said, yes, ma'am. And that's what she had, this strength. And see, I got here and I was so beat up and so broken down. And Judy had the original ovaries of steel. And I'll tell you, everybody always talks about growing balls. Who wants balls? I've seen them a time or two. Not exactly the fashion accessory I'm going for. Y'all can keep them, but I prefer my shiny ovaries of steel. You can hear them clink when I walk. And she took no crap off of anybody. She was the most loving, strong woman who showed me how to hold my head up high and be true to myself. That I never had to sell my soul for anybody ever again. And she saved my life. She didn't have all my issues. I am so grateful. What she had was a program. She had principles. And she led me through those steps. And probably the greatest gift I got of doing a fifth step with that woman, because I sat in the meetings long enough with you. I don't know if it freaked any of y'all out when you first came to AA, but people talked about stuff I was taking to the grave, openly. In fact, you would just be yakking, and I would have the urge to put my hand over your mouth and go, shh. Don't be telling people that crap. But what happened was sitting in those rooms and hearing you talking about all this stuff, I learned that none of us got with wings and a halo. We'd all done a whole lot of the same stuff. But what I was terrified to share with another human being in my fifth step was not the things I'd done, it was the things I felt and I thought. The things that I thought I just knew made me crazy and defective, and it kept that stiff arm, because I sat in meetings with you, and I knew that you could love me as much as you thought you could love me, but if you really knew me, you wouldn't feel that way. And it was the thing that kept me separate from you. If you knew me, you would not want to be sitting here with me. And when I sat down and shared that stuff with her, it was that alcoholic math. It makes absolutely no sense. I knew she loved me more. After I told her this stuff, I never wanted to tell anybody. And that was where I learned how to have a relationship with another human being. Because she flat out told me, I don't want anything you have, trust me. And she said, but I'm willing to do anything to help you get better. And she did. She showed me what unconditional love looked like with hair and skin. She showed me what a higher power looks like, that absolute pure love of being there for another human being without expecting anything in return. And I'm so forever grateful to that woman. You know, she talked me through how to make my amends, John, and that 8-step list. And it was. And I got to tell you, I had like 6 people on my never list, and all of them showed up in the next few months out of the blue. I lived in a city of 4 million people. I should never see these people again. But it was that instant thought of, do I want to be free or do I want to run? You taught me what it felt like to look the world in the eye and not have to hang my head and not have to. I had to change some of my verbiage. I don't know if anyone else has ever put their hand on their hip and say, I'm not that kind of woman anymore. But I want to talk about yesterday. But you taught me about living in today and making those amends and holding my head up high and being free. Because we talk about those steps, and it's that, give up, own up, make up, grow up. And I don't believe that 10, 11, and 12 are things you gloss over. I believe the growing up and the emotional sobriety that comes with working 10, 11, and 12 was so important for me, because it isn't just like, yeah, I'm done. It was about for me, it was about life hitting me in the face. I don't know if anybody else, I always feel, how when you're having one of those great days and you feel like you got it all going on and you trip on the sidewalk in front of a large crowd of people? Sobriety's like that. That's about the time when I think I'm all that in a bag of chips. Oh crap, I'm still the same judgmental, opinionated a-hole that walked through the door. And I have to own that stuff, and I have to be able to live free still within these steps. And I love in the 12th step when it talks about spiritual awakening. And it calls it, it talks about when a man or woman can do, feel, see, believe that which they could not do before in their own unaided strength and resources alone. And I got to tell you, I think that to me is a promise, because it started happening long before I got to 12. Those days when I went to a meeting and when I absolutely had no intention of going, but somehow I found myself there. Those days when I picked up the phone and called a sponsor I wasn't going to talk to, and I started telling her what was going on with me. All those days I prayed to a God that I wasn't sure was there or that I wanted to talk to. All these things that I was able to do, feel, see, and believe that I couldn't before. All those days I put one foot in front of the other, and I just did not drink if that was the best I could do that day. Were the beginnings of that spiritual awakening for me. But for me, every time I sit in a meeting, I get to see that spiritual awakening around me. And it's so important to me in my life today is for me to have that gauge. And I tell you, the longer you're here, those amends seem to be a little bit more painful sometimes. I actually last week was out of town, and I work with a woman who is challenging. And I don't know if anyone else has ever been bad-mouthing somebody in a text and accidentally sent the text to the person you're talking about. Yeah. And I called my sponsor and went, wah! And she said, you go knock on her hotel room door and you ask her for her phone and you tell her what you've done, but you tell her you don't want her to read it because you don't want to hurt her. And I didn't want to hurt her. But what I hope, see, there's being sorry that I got caught. There's that regret. There's that remorse. There's being sorry that I did it in the first place. My goal is to be sorry I ever did it in the first place and not to have to eat crow, to stop before I send the text. But I'll tell you what, bottom line was I was not going to be able to live with that. When they talk about that path getting narrower, I was not going to be able to show up at coffee and go, hey, how you doing? Get my text. My bad. No, not for a 6-hour drive back across Oregon. Oh, hell no. And but I tell you, they saved my life. If I'm willing to do what I have to do to keep my side of the street clean so that I get to walk in the sunlight of the Spirit. I got married in sobriety. I got divorced in sobriety. And I got married in sobriety. And it was 1987 when we met, 1988 when we got married. And I felt I'd found my soulmate. I absolutely had found my soulmate. I'd never loved anybody like that. And I'd been married before, but there was that whole thing of being in recovery and being together. And I got to tell you that We moved to Idaho in '93, and from Houston, and to Pocatello, Idaho, and a little bit of a culture shock. But I loved it, and what I did was I watched enough people who moved in sobriety and never got back involved, and I didn't want to be one of those people. I saw the people who came crawling, the fortunate ones who came crawling back after they lost their sobriety, and I didn't want to be one of those people. So my sponsor made me go to my first meeting. I was crying and tell them that I was special. They just didn't know it yet. And that my sponsor said they had to treat me special, and they said, "Yeah, here's the phone list." But I will tell you what happened was they were building a women's prison across the valley right at that same time, and I was like, "Oh, thank goodness." H&I. And that's always been my anchor, and what keeps me grounded in these rooms is carrying that message. And I was so grateful that they built that prison because it gave me a job and it gave me things to do. And I always tell the story. I had this normal friend that I'd made, and she knew I was in the program, and she knew something about it, but not really. But I remember one day she looked at me and she said, "You know, you just like moved here and made friends, and you got all these things you're doing." And she said, "God, I think I lived here for 3 years before I had a really good friend, and I don't understand." And I remember I said, "Well, Carrie, drink like a pig and destroy your life, and you can have friends everywhere you go." So. And it's the truth. We have a bond with people that just doesn't exist anywhere else. We just like walk in, hey, and we're just instantly connected to the Spirit. You know, it's so different than anything else. We just have this, what they talk about in the book about long after you've been rescued from the shipwreck, that camaraderie continues on. And but I can tell you that what happened through the years there in Idaho is I served as a delegate and for Panel 52, and then I was elected trustee in 2006 for the Pacific region. And the greatest gift of that was all the people you get to meet. It isn't about long plane trips across the United States and sitting in airports. Trust me, but it is about the people you get to meet along the way, because that's the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're the, you know, we are the messiest, most screwed up people, and that's what makes us wonderful, right? Nobody, I don't think there's anyone in this room who wants to hang around with a perfect person. They just irritate the crap out of you. But you take all these little broken pieces that we are, and we make this incredible mosaic when it's put together. Incredible. All of our frailties and our shortcomings make us who we are. So during this time, though, it became apparent to me that there were some real problems that had never gone away in my marriage. And during this time, there was someone called my house that I really didn't want to talk to, because I always felt she'd had a very inappropriate friendship with my husband, and she was dying of this disease. And last person I want to help, but she's dying. She's already attempted suicide. And the next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Houston, and I'm taking her to meetings, and I'm introducing her to my sponsor, and my sponsor's daughters are both in the program, and I'm trying to get her plugged in. And we began to talk every day for like the next 30 days after that. And it was, her mom was dying of cancer. And I remember she called me, and she'd been drinking, and she said, "I just can't stay sober. I have so much guilt. I don't understand how you can help me when I'm your husband's mistress." And I got to tell you, I didn't care. I said, "Just don't drink. Please don't drink. Please go to the meeting. Let me call." I knew that my sponsor was out of the country, but I said, "I can get Carol or Diane, her daughters, to come over." And, you know, she took her life. She didn't make it to another meeting. And something for me broke, and there was no going back. There had been many years of behavior that I suspected, and, you know, the good news, bad news is when you find out you were right on every single time, and the bad news is you find out you're right on every single time. And the problem is that Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me about the woman I want to be and what's important to me, and that it's okay for me to say the words I need, I deserve, I want, and not feel bad about it. And I knew that I could no longer continue in that. And I left that marriage, and I thought it was going to kill me. Absolutely. Years of sobriety, I thought I was going to die. It was not pretty. I was fortunate enough, I moved to the other side of the state, so one of us wouldn't have a steak knife through their left ventricle, and it wasn't going to be me. And but I was so angry, I was so hurt, because, man, my whole script of what my life was supposed to be had just been torn to shreds. And thank God for service, because there was a friend of mine who was a past delegate who just hounded me, because, see, I was going to meetings, auditing for a new home group, and he just rode me like Zorro. He'd be like, "Up, best home group in Idaho, starting in 5 minutes. I'd be like, I'm at the grocery store. He said, well, you better go throw that crap in the refrigerator and get your ass over here. And what happened was he made me go to his home group, and I walked into this group where there was just a room full of women who scooped my poor, miserable ass up and took me with them. Nobody cared. Those women did not care how angry I was. They didn't care how hurt I was. They didn't care how much I cried. I scared the bejesus out of the men because I talked about running my ex-husband over all the time with my car because I'm from Texas. And but the women were like, I got a truck. I'll drive. Come on, let's go. But you know, anytime there's a split in Alcoholics Anonymous or within the fellowships, it's not good. It's hard. It's hard on everybody, and I absolutely understand that. I had sponsees who carried my butt through that, hands down. I don't know what the hell I ever did for them, but they saved my life. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and they carried me through that time. And they wanted to kill him, and I said, oh, no, that's my job. Your job is to make sure that when he walks into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because you still live in that town, that you smile, you wave, and you welcome him. Hug him if he'll let you. Because the only chance he's got is to stay in these rooms. Never make him feel uncomfortable in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I secretly hoped that he would contract a rare tropical disease and his penis would fall off. But he could, by God, do that sober. And but what happened was my sponsor said, we're going to make it through this, but you got a lot of work to do. And I did. I had a lot of work to do. I had a lot of writing, and I had a lot of inventory to do. And I'll tell you what I found was the same flawed thinking that I walked into these rooms with. I can rest satisfaction if only I manage well. If this little girl just dances fast enough, and she works hard enough, and she's pretty enough and smart enough, everything will be okay, and you won't get hurt ever again. And I got to find out that just because I'm sober, whatever many years, doesn't mean that I don't get wet when it rains. Life still happens to me sober. I don't get any special treatment because I'm sober. What I do get is the gift of a fellowship that is willing to walk with me all the way through it. And I am so grateful. They probably mumbled it underneath their breath, but I am so grateful, and no one said to me, you know, she should be weller than that after all these years. You know, you'd think she'd get better, because it was not an easy time for me. It was just like being a newcomer. I hung on with a vengeance. I clawed my way through the steps. It felt just like my first year of sobriety. And I did exactly the same things I had to do in my first year. But the biggest thing was I had to swallow a big old lump of ego and pride. And I had to tear up the script about the way I thought my life was supposed to be. And you know, one day I noticed that the clouds parted and the sun was shining again. No one could have told me what day that was going to be, but all I know is that when they say hang in there 5 more minutes, they mean it, because it happened for me. And I am so grateful for that. You know, my daughter moved to Portland a couple years ago, and she has my grandson. She's married, and she has my little grandson, Gavin the Gargantuan. And she said, I want you to live here. I want you to be with us. I want you to be close to us. And a year ago, I said, okay. And one more time, I picked up and I moved in sobriety. And it was the best thing I could have done. I love that little man so much. My little grandson is so cute. And he crawls up in my lap, and he puts his arms around my neck, and he says, I love you, Mimi. And I just say, oh, I'm going to start saving your bail money right now. My daughter comes over and just hangs out at my house. She just wants to be with her mama. You know, my sponsees and my daughter, they just all blend into this big herd. You can't tell who's family and who's not. And what a gift that is. She's a couple weeks away from having my granddaughter, Olivia Ryan. And you know, Olivia, this kid is so good. Olivia is my sister who has cerebral palsy, is mentally retarded. And my daughter wanted to make sure she had a namesake. And so she's naming my granddaughter after her. And I am so excited that I get to be there and that I get to be present in her life for this. What a gift. What a bloody gift. For the woman who did not want to even have any children to be Mimi of the Year, man. I just love it. And I got a host of friends in Happy Valley. I landed right in the middle of another great herd. Lots of ovaries of steel there. And I get to go between Idaho and Oregon and just feel the love. You know, feel the love that we have in these rooms. You know, I was thinking about one of our friends who just passed away, Linda H. and I got to wrap this up. She just passed away this week, and her husband had reminded me about when he was delegate and she was secretary. We took, I was there for an election assembly, and they took me with them to a Farsi meeting in Irvine, and we had a case of big books because we wanted to make sure they knew that we had the big book in their language. And you could tell when we first got there, they were really kind of nervous. This is about 6 years ago. It was like, this is a Farsi meeting, right? And we're like, oh yeah, it's okay. Language of the heart would be fine. And half of them said, oh, my Farsi is just as bad as my English. I'll just speak English. But they just welcomed us. There was no barrier. And they were so happy about the books that we brought. And I always remember Greg Muth talking about when we printed 6 of our pamphlets in Farsi, and they took them to a conference over in the Middle East, and that there were some men there from Iraq who wept in this meeting because they were reading the message of recovery in their language because somebody dropped $1 in a basket and said, let's help carry this message, period. We don't care who you are, where you are, what you believe. If you have the disease of alcoholism, we want to help. And that meeting was so important to me that they were so bound and determined as trusted servants to make sure that that group knew that they were part of this Alcoholics Anonymous, not a separate Alcoholics Anonymous. My grandfather moved to this country and changed his name and changed his faith for fear of retribution. And sometimes I get really concerned with a lot of the stuff that happens within our fellowship here, our conference here. What kind of a spiritual holocaust are we going to have in Alcoholics Anonymous here when we stop telling people what they have to think or believe, what they have to wear, what they have to say? I believe our literature is so clear. The problem is some people just don't read it. And for me, I want to make sure that anyone who walks into these rooms is welcome. It doesn't matter their faith. It doesn't matter their religious preferences, anything. It's the thing you learn to in prison meetings. Never talk about the things that divide us. And when I get in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I try to really make sure that I'm aware. I don't want to do anything that divides us in there. Then it may be a common practice, such as a prayer, but I don't want to do anything that makes someone think that we have another requirement for membership, unspoken. And so being at that Farsi meeting and being there and knowing that Linda passed away this week, I just want to honor her memory with the fact that she was dead set that we need to make sure those people knew they were part of AA and they weren't separate. I want to close with my little story real quick. And it's about being in service to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that sometimes, and I know speaking can be kind of a heady thing, and people start to think they, need to be treated differently, and I think it's a real slippery slope. And I know that even in service, I know as a delegate I got treated really well. As a trustee, some people really kind of made a fuss, and it's very uncomfortable when people try to treat you like something other than a garden variety drunk, because the highest you get here is sober, right? And so I always want to close with my little story, so that everyone remembers, for me, about staying right-sized in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the story is that it's Palm Sunday. This is religious in context so that you can, and it's just for context, but it's Palm Sunday and Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on his donkey. And the streets are packed. I mean, they know he's coming. And you cannot put another person on these streets. And they are all there for the Messiah. And they are waving palms and they're throwing flowers and they're all singing, "Hail to the Messiah, hail to the chosen one." I mean, it is absolutely the most breathtaking sight you have ever seen. They are all there for him. But think for just 1 minute if the donkey thought all those people were there for him. He's got the same view. And how is he supposed to know that all the hoo-ha isn't for him? And haven't I done the same thing as a trusted servant for Alcoholics Anonymous? That I walk away anytime thinking that any of the affection or applause or affirmations or anything has anything to do with me. I always need to remember my job is just to be the jackass carrying the message. Thank you.